Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We are webcasting this today, so I wanted to try to be on time. My name is Andrea Camp. I'm with the Civil Society Institute, and welcome to Building Healthier Communities, Environment, Energy, and the Role of Women. We thank the New York Women's Foundation for hosting this. We are proud to be a sponsor of it. And I want to welcome you to what we think is going to be an interesting discussion about where we as a country may build an emerging consensus and move forward to build a clean energy future, one that's good for communities and families, and one in which women have a strong, important role to play. The basis of our optimism is what you're going to see today. Vince Brailio and Celinda Lake are going to provide an analysis of both the qualitative and the quantitative research the Civil Society Institute, which is a think tank in the Boston area, has done over the past, this research we're presenting has been done since 2014 on, and our pollsters will explain more the methodology and the background on that. But we wanted to present it to you today. Now, our work has been rooted in the belief that those closest to the problems, those in communities, are more likely to understand the central notion and nature of a situation, and that their insights are the key to effective solutions. We think it's especially true around the issue of energy production, whether it's from the coal fields in Appalachia or in West Virginia, whether it's in the urban communities, which have a concentration of people of color who live with pollution from power plants. We believe that those on the ground, those closest to the problem, are the ones who really can make the breakthrough solutions. One of the things that you'll see in our analysis is the role which concern for health in our communities has on people's interest in renewable energy and energy efficiency. And we believe that today you'll hear how there's a growing convergence of interest and around renewable energy and efficiency, why this health concern is driving it, and the role women have in accelerating the pace of change from an old energy system to a new one that offers economic benefits for consumers and their communities, as well as payoffs in health and the protection of clean water and air. I want to reiterate something that is core to who we are at CSI and one that our research emphasizes, and that's common ground. Most research looks at what divides us and what polarizes us. Our research shows that breakthroughs can happen if we build upon the areas where we are in agreement. Most informative, our research shows that women can play a very important role in forging this common ground and in building upon it. The data that Vince and Celinda will discuss today is part of a much larger survey. I think they'll both refer to the other elements that we've tested, but we're focusing today on this issue of renewable energy and energy efficiency, and in particular, the potential women have to leverage their consumer power to accelerate clean energy. The emphasis this presentation will be is on using the marketplace to change the markets in the ways that we provide energy, and how what we do with our pocketbooks and the financial decisions that we make in our households and in our communities can drive this. So you see today there was a fact sheet. We want you to take a look at it. We think it demonstrates the growing pace of renewable energy and energy efficiency, and that it's just growing. Wherever you are, people understand that it is part of our future. So let's get to the information. I am thrilled that we have both Celinda Lake and Vince Brailio here. We have bios of them both. I'll just say that Celinda is one of the Democratic Party's most respected political strategists. She is one of the pioneers in terms of understanding women, how they vote, how they buy, what they do, and in particular, where they are on issues. Her firm, Lake Research Partners, has been instrumental towards moving the progressive agenda forward on a variety of issues. She co-authored the book, which I think many of you know, What Women Really Want, with a Republican pollster, Kellyanne Conway, who I think we've all seen on the air recently. Vince is a Republican pollster. He's been a pioneer in the world of polling. He was a co-founder of Worthland Worldwide, which helped to set some of the standards in polling. And I think both Democrats and Republicans know and respect Worthland Worldwide. He's been active in presidential campaigns from Ronald Reagan, Morning in America, to George Bush. He's also done a lot in with companies and market analysis. And so we have this complementary view of this, looking at this data through two distinct lenses, but it will be interesting, I think, to see where the convergence is. So, Celinda, you're up first. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. And I really want to thank the Women's Foundation for putting this together. To be honest with you, there aren't very many places I would go 40 days before an election. So it speaks to my very, very, very high regard for CSI and Andrea and Pam and you all that I would be here. I also want to thank so much Vince, because every time I hear him, I learn from him, and he has had a tremendous commitment on this issue, and it's very, very exciting to be part of this research with him. So, of course, it is up to the women. Like, we already had our day job, and then we have our night job. Now we have our after midnight job. But it will be very much women who will determine the future of renewable energy, clean energy, and where this happens. And it will happen, frankly, at the community level, at the local and individual level. And I think that is a very, very important nexus for the work of CSI with and the environmental community with the Women's Foundations. I think this is a very exciting partnership that you all are contemplating. And I think that, again, in this age of unbelievable polarization and cynicism, it is something that it is a place where action can really happen. One of the things in terms of the book that we wrote 10 years ago with Kellyanne, and people often think, well, how could you have written a book with her? And actually it was quite easy, because we decided to write a book on the 80% of things that women agreed on rather than the 20% of things that women disagreed on. So it seems when you're at a national focus that it's really hard. How could you and Vince work together? How could you agree on anything? Actually, it's quite easy to agree when you're talking about what's going on at the local and community level. And this is the list of research that we pulled from. And I believe that you can have all of these slides too, so don't worry about taking notes. So first of all, the first thing that we see is that voters have remarkably little information and limited information about renewable energy options. And it's really pretty stunning, right? You would think that people would really know this issue by now. And in the focus groups, it was really true that people did not know very much about what was renewable or how to get started. They tended to have big picture projects in mind, like thought they had to take their whole roof off and change their roof. And by the way, I have solar panels on my roof now. It's the best thing I ever did. But having put that aside, and then the women in particular are very conscious of the fact that there's a lot of green scamming going on. It's kind of like organic food, quote unquote organic food. So they're constantly being marketed in terms of clean energy and renewable energy. Now, whether women know less or lie less about it, women have say that they have less knowledge than men about renewable energy. And what's interesting is some of the women most committed to renewable energy have the least amount of information. So one of the things I love about polling is that conventional wisdom is usually wrong, plus or minus 5%. The conventional wisdom, of course, everybody knows that Latinas and women of color in general are less environmentally oriented and less interested in renewable energy. Well, this data is gonna completely debunk that, and what everybody knows is absolutely wrong. That said, women of color who are very committed around renewable energy, you'll see some astounding data, do have even less information than women overall about what are the options, or again, maybe more cautious and more honest about their level of knowledge. Women are more likely to want to transition to renewable energy, but that word transition is very important. Women are more risk averse, and women also know women are much less likely than men to do a Hail Mary for change. And you can see that right now in the millennials. You can see that right now among blue-collar men and women with the presidential election. Women kind of want to know where are we headed, what's the risk. Men are like, let's make the change and see what happens later. And women go, yeah, we've done that and look how it's worked out. So that word transition is very important. But women are very interested in transitioning to renewable energy sources. Men tend to be more interested, although still interested in transition, to maintaining the current energy mix for the foreseeable future. Women under 50, really interested in renewable energy, 62%. Now, women under 50 are also two things that are very important. They are heading households in record numbers, and they are making decisions in record numbers in terms of purchases. They are influencing big purchases in their households, even more than women over 50. So their orientation is a very important orientation. In terms of the priorities for energy policy, this is asking people how important are each of these national energy policies. And you will see that for women, the top energy policy and the top importance is clean air and clean water. These are very, very salient issues to women. And women, by the way, take this orientation to other realms as well. So we just finished a study on regulation, and the number one regulation that women wanted was clean air and clean water. So women are very, very committed to clean air and clean water, and they make the immediate connection, as you can see here, to health, which is very, very strong for people. And women particularly notice the changes in health for their family members, both aging family members and their children. You can also see as you move down that protecting the environment is strong, expanding consumer access. So women like the twofer. The number one way to market to women is offer 2 for 1. Doesn't that always attract your eyes? It always attracts mine. Because women are swamped and they're short of money. And they think, boy, 2 for 1, that's exactly what I need. Maybe 3 for 1 even. And there's a lot of scamming that goes on because of that. But women are very interested in places where they can combine their consumer behavior and being environmentally oriented. And that's been true, by the way, for a long time. And then women are very interested in the ability to generate power at home with solar panels. They're very, very fascinated by the idea of solar appliances, solar panels. And while it's not the topic of our conversation today, it's quite interesting that you see worldwide women really driving the adaptation of solar power and small solar appliances, even in developing countries. Now, that said, while women really value air and water, there's still, and there's a connection in their minds between energy sources and air and water, there's still a gap there. And one of the ways to really firm up that connection is to use the word pollution. Women are extremely responsive to the word pollution. And in fact, we've seen that in a lot of climate change work that we've done as well. The best language, by the way, to talk to women about climate change is to talk about, one, preventing damage to the climate. women are very, very prevention oriented. They like to get out ahead of things. And women also think that they are in charge of prevention. They think that society and men tend to let things happen and then pick up the pieces. Women would like to prevent things from happening, and they perceive themselves to be the drivers of prevention. They also like to take forward steps. That said, women are very conscious of affordability. And women are shorter of money than men. And women also have a narrower band. Maybe we're more frugal or maybe we're more risk averse. But we did a very interesting study where we asked men and women, what is the amount of the check that you would write without even thinking about it? And at every income level, women's checks were 50% of men's checks. So, of course, we make less money, so we're writing smaller checks. But even if you control for that, women were writing half the size checks of men. So this affordability is a big, big concern and for women. Now, one of the things that tends to get women over their cost concerns, first of all, is making it affordable and making it payable over time and all those kinds of techniques that are usable, that commercial advertising uses for women, pay over time, pay in small increments. But the other thing is to connect it to health or pollution. When you connect something to health, it energizes women to overcome some of their cost concerns. Now, it doesn't overcome the absolute amount of money that they have, but it shifts their priorities a little bit. And what's interesting and important to note is that 80% of the healthcare decision makers in America are women. And this is the one area actually where men admit that the women in their lives make the decisions. Now, there may be plenty of areas where we're really making the decisions, but health is the one area where men actually admit it and say, yeah, my wife tells me to go to the doctor. My sister told me I had to get insurance. My mother said you got to get the flu vaccination. Women drive men's decisions on health care. So that's a very, very powerful linkage. Both men and women report that they don't know very much about renewable energy resources in their own communities. Now, women like to take local and community action. And they also believe, one, that they will have more influence, it will be more transparent, they will be more efficacious. This lack of information of what you can do at the local level is a huge, huge gap in terms of moving forward here. Women really want the 10-step plan, the website that says 10 things you can do at home. And they also want it to be more, frankly, than change a light bulb, even though they're very willing to change light bulbs. Women and men believe that it is important to invest in clean renewable energy sources like wind and solar. And you can see here that there's quite a bit of intensity to this belief. And women and men believe that this is a twofer, right? We're going to create jobs here at home, and we're going to make the environment better. People also tend to think that unlike a lot of jobs that are being created, these are pretty good paying jobs. And women and men in this country very, very irritated that they perceive that this was an area we started out and now we're falling behind. Why in the world are we buying Chinese solar panels? We should have been, we invented them, which may or may not be true, but Americans believe they invented everything. So we invented them and then now somebody's outselling us on them. Why is that happening? Notice also African American women. Very, very intense in terms of, almost to the level, frankly, of a core value that we should have investment in renewables. And people like that investment to have a local face to it, to start locally. Why are renewables important to women? Well, you can see here in the quotes. They don't pollute, and we're running out of fossil fuels. Notice the degree to which women bring in non-transactional language, though. They bring in values-oriented language. The earth, our kids. We're starting to use up other resources. Women respond to values-oriented arguments. It's not just a transactional commodity for them. And actually, we undersell this issue to women and most issues to women when we make it purely transactional, purely a vending machine kind of relationship, rather than talking about the future, children, our earth, humanity. And it's interesting what kinds of words are testing well well with women. There would have been a time, honestly, when if you had suggested, well, let's talk about humans and let's talk about Earth, and I would have said, well, that's cute, but that's kind of a little liberal New Yorkie if you want to know the truth. But now people like talking about people and humanity and the Earth, and women are really leading that. Now, there are some people do have some concerns about the transition. First of all, people, again, are worried about the cost. And Vince is going to talk about this in some very, very creative ways that he has looked about isolating the women who are cost sensitive and figuring out how to overcome that barrier. But women are cost sensitive. And you'll see here that women, particularly African American women, who are some of the strongest on this issue, responding more strongly that it's too expensive to transition away from fossil fuels and nuclear power to renewable energy and energy efficiency. Women really are confused about what's available locally, what's the first step that I can take if I'm not ready to completely convert my roof, and what's an affordable first step? What's an affordable set of actions that I can do? Men tend to believe more that fossil fuels are a cornerstone of our current energy system. Men really are the ones who buy into we got to have some of everything. Women would like a backup of fossil fuels, like they'd like a switch in case the sun goes down and doesn't come up the next day. They like a switch they could turn on, but they think of it more as a backup than a cornerstone. Men tend to think of it more as a cornerstone. Transition is good, and women believe it's doable, but they also worry about, is this more hope or is this real? It's important that we do it, but how do we get there? And the more you talk about children, health, and clean, the more urgent you make this for women, the more they want to move forward immediately. Women, if you look right now at marketing to women, so look at the commercial. This will be a fun thing to do tonight. There are two things that they sell to women today. One thing, well, three: family, and people believe that this is good for their families. The second thing they sell, and the most used word in advertising other than you, is new. So Americans do not, and American women don't want, notice when they're buying Tide, we don't sell to American women, this is the Tide your mother used. That Americans will think that's absurd. What we sell is, it's new and improved Tide, right? It's purple Tide, it's pod Tide, it's blue Tide, whatever kind of Tide. It's a new and improved Tide. New is the most common word after you used in advertising. And then the third thing that's sold to women, and this is pretty amusing, we did a study of what are core values for women. And there was a time we wanted respect. Then there was a time we wanted equality. Now we just want control. And we'll be in charge of it ourselves. Go home tonight and monitor the number of ads that sell implicitly or explicitly control to women, whether it's Cialis or a car or a cell phone. They are selling control to women. And the interesting thing about renewable energy is it's at the center of all of that. Good for the family. It's the new way of doing things, and it puts you in control. But that's where the lack of knowledge, that's where the gap holds women back, because they want to be in control of this decision and they don't have the knowledge they feel like to be in control right now. It's also why the community nexus is so important, because women feel like I'll have more control over what we do here in our local community than I can have in what we're going nationwide. Women respond very strongly to the notion of moral obligation. We are morally obligated to move our country away from fossil fuels to clean, renewable energy. Now, you can be wildly in favor of something and not think of yourself as being particularly morally obligated. That's a pretty heavy-duty language. But notice how this Latino woman's quote, and there were tons of quotes across women, the immediate connection, because renewable energy is immediately connected to our children. And notice we weren't using the words children. Women kept inserting kids and health into the conversation. That ups the moral obligation. 75% of Americans and almost 80% of women believe the next generation will be worse off than this one. That is a devastating indictment to men and women in this country. And it makes for a unique time where people really want to figure out what is better for the next generation, what is better for our children. Notice also that women are very interested in assessing the impact on clean air and clean water. And we're coming back here to our original frame, right? Clean air and clean water were the number one thing that women wanted. And they also say that thinking about that increases the moral obligation that they feel. Notice the real salience of clean air and clean water to Latinas. We do not understand that we should be talking much, much more to the Latinas about the environment that we are doing now. Finally, how important is renewable energy to each of the following? First of all, men and women believe it's important for the economy. And again, as I said, people think this is a modern economic policy, and why the heck aren't we getting more on top of it as it is? But notice women and the clean air and clean water. I mean, every way they could tell us, they believe this is a very, very, very strong connection. Finally, what are the benefits of the renewable energy transition? So accelerating the development of renewable energies could create thousands of well-paying middle-class jobs. Women and men, very supportive of that, but look at the Latina women, off the charts in terms of believing that this could be good for jobs. And Latina women believe very, very strongly, because these jobs are going to be in construction, things like that, it's going to be Latino households who are doing these jobs. They also think these would be great jobs for their kids. And they're very interested in what is the next better job that our kids can get. Accelerating the development of renewable energy sources will result in cleaner air and water for everyone. Look at first of all, look at women in general, but look at the Latinas. We are missing such an opportunity here not to be talking more to Latinas about this. Having said that, though, the biggest block for Latinas is cost. Latinas really, really concerned about what is the affordable option to get started here. One of the things that people love, subsidizing homeowners who install renewable energy. 76% of women are favorable to this. Women under 50 and over 50, wildly in favor of it. By the way, women under 50, even more money sensitive than women over 50 now. And that includes the millennial women, who are very committed to things but very short of money and heavily in debt. So to summarize, it is up to the women, and happily they are ready for the cause. Ironically, because we don't have the right messaging, we're honestly getting in our own way. This should be the revolution. Where is the revolution? We're stalling the revolution because we don't even understand who we should be targeting, and we don't understand how to talk about it. And the three ways to talk about it are for our children, for health, for clean air and water, and using the language pollution. What is the bite-sized, affordable step that you can take, that this is a transition, and that this is something that starts at local communities. So you can understand why we think this partnership with the Women's Foundations is so important. And let me turn it over to Vince to tell you the second half of the story.
I am a walking example of how women have taken control of health care, because my wife told me for 5 or 6 years that I had to wear hearing aids, and I finally made the concession, and I have them in. So if you talk softly, I'll actually be able to pick up on it. I am an Italian, unfortunately only part, but I claim identity as an Italian because I can't talk without moving and using my hands. So I'm going to do that if you'll bear with me. And I know that means a moving target, and you're going to have to move your head back and forth, and that can be irritating. I apologize in advance. I'm delighted to be here and with Celinda, and I say amen to what she has said. She has given you a real deep dive into women and this issue of energy and the environment, and I applaud everything she said. I have to, because I worked with her on a good part of it. So Celinda and I are very committed to this, as you are, and I hope that you will find this morning a place where you can actually make a significant contribution in building the momentum for this issue. And the momentum is growing, Celinda, and I'm going to talk today about a very, very new piece of research. In fact, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. It didn't exist, and we're going to share with you the very preliminary findings from it. And I think what you will find is that it confirms what Celinda has been saying and extends it even further in terms of the growth of support occurring in this country for a move to renewable, sustainable, clean energy sources. Before I get into this, I want to say just a word about the title of this presentation, The Search for the Civil Society Voter. That's probably right up there with the search for the dodo bird and other extinct forms of animal life. But the truth of the matter is, we think this is really important. So let me tell you briefly what we think a civil society voter is. A civil society voter, we got to figure out a way to say that without lisping. A civil society voter is one who basically pays a lot of attention to issues. Issues are important to them, number one. Number two, they're fairly optimistic people. They believe in the country, and they believe in the country's ability to actually do something to solve a problem. Number three, they're agreeable people. They actually have friends whose political views differ from their own. And number four, they would like to get to work if they knew how. We think that's extremely important for the future of our country, and we've dedicated the last 3 years to research to try to find that dodo bird called the civil society voter, and by golly, we have been successful. It's not a majority of the American electorate, but it is a solid plurality, and it's growing, and we think it's important to understand them as an audience and know how to talk to them to motivate and encourage and help to build that movement within our society. So, having said that, I want to turn to the issue of energy, sustainable, clean energy, as the issue of topic and focus today. Why that issue? Because of all the issues that these civil society voters pay attention to, the number one issue at the top of the list is energy and the environment. So if we have a shot at actually building a movement based on a civil discussion to actually move the needle in a direction that'll be beneficial to the vast majority of Americans, maybe we can start with energy and the environment. And so we're going to share with you, as I said, data that 2 weeks ago didn't exist. It's very new. I cannot address it in the depth and with the excellence of presentation that Celinda addressed the work that we've done in the past together and that she's done on her own. But we will give you as much as we can, and we can promise you that there will be more coming as we have a chance to actually analyze it and get more in depth into the questions surrounding these data. So let's begin with what we focus on in terms of questions that define public opinion on energy and the environment. And I'm going to ask you to just read quickly with me each of these questions with this little green dot up here. You can see it? We'll just go through and we'll talk about each of these questions briefly. The first question you've seen before as part of Celinda's presentation, that is the moral obligation to protect the environment from pollution. The second question, accelerating the development of renewable energy such as wind and solar, the result being clean air and water for everyone. A country free from imports from unfriendly countries. We must continue to develop our own natural gas and fossil fuel resources. This is an important question. I want you to keep this in mind because this is a dividing point in terms of support for renewable energy, and an important one, and I'll point it out in just a moment. The fourth question, accelerating development. of energy-efficient products and renewable energy sources potentially create hundreds of jobs, well-paying middle-class jobs. Again, Celinda reported on these data as well. Transitioning away from fossil fuels will make our products more expensive. And then lastly, fossil fuels must remain the cornerstone of our energy system because of cost and jobs. Some of these have been reported on by Celinda from past research. That's no accident. We've been doing this for 3 years now. We have literally thousands of interviews with people across the country on these questions. And these questions repeatedly come out as the definers of people's position on the issue of clean and sustainable energy. And it allows us to use these questions to formulate audiences. Now, most of us in this room are involved in one way or another in persuasive communications. There are several things you can do in a persuasive communication. You can reinforce somebody whose beliefs agree with your point of view. You can activate somebody by finding out where there is some agreement, but it hasn't quite reached the surface yet. You can educate people with persuasive communication, and you can convert them. The easiest of these 4 approaches to communicating with any audience is reinforcement. So if we can find the best audiences who have items that we can reinforce and build on, we have the nucleus for developing and enhancing the movement for rapid adoption of renewable, clean, sustainable energy. Ergo, that's our goal, okay? These questions are the best questions that we found, and we've tried over a dozen, probably 2 dozen actually, questions. These are the most predictive. These are the ones which cut the best in terms of defining the audiences of renewable energy. Now, every question asked in a piece of survey research has 2 dimensions. It has a direction, what percentage agree, what percentage disagree. That gives you the direction of the question. It also has a second element, which we call intensity, and that is the strength of agreement. That means that the best questions in a piece of survey research are questions which are asked along a continuum, from point number 1 being, I strongly agree, and point number 7, I strongly disagree, and people have the option of distributing their answers between those 2 extreme points. When you use that technique, it allows you to scale your variables, that is, to use statistics which are more than just percents by using means and variance and other systems. If you look at these questions, in this column, we have reported 2 things, the direction and the intensity of each question. The measure that we're using here is the strength of agreement. Now, in order to get all information on a slide like this, we have to truncate and not use all data points. So we're only going to use the agree side of that 7-point scale that goes from 1, strongly disagree, I would say, to 7, strongly agree. 72% agree with the statement that we have a moral obligation to protect the world from pollution. The intensity is 32%. Oh, I need the, okay, I'm not being picked up. Never been told that before. 32% strongly agree with that point of view. To Celinda's point earlier, this is a driver, particularly among women, which enables a lot of good, positive discussion on the issue of clean energy and the environment. 32% is a very, very solid strength or intensity of feeling. So is anything above 20. So you have strong intensity in terms of cleaner air and water for everyone, strong intensity for energy, freeing ourselves from imports of energy from unfriendly countries. When it gets into the 20s, it's still good, but it's getting a little weaker. When it gets down into the low teens and single digits, the intensity is quite weak. Why does that matter? You cannot build a movement with questions or positions which are weak in intensity. It takes strength of intensity to build any kind of a movement. And the movement that we see growing here, and you can see from the direction in terms of 72% protecting the world environment from pollution is an obligation, 70% cleaner air and water for everyone from renewable energy sources. The direction's very solid. So is the intensity on those kinds of questions, but not all. So what does that tell us and how do we use it? I'm sorry, what does it tell us and how do we use it? What it tells us is this. All of us in high school physics played with a prism. And you know that when you drive regular light through a prism, what it does is it separates out the various wavelengths into the primary colors, which creates a spectrum of colors. And we can all play with it and think about how that happens, because the light waves do vary in their length. In the same sense, public opinion varies in qualities which are measurable as well. It's not the length of a light wave, but it is the degree to which people have different positions and agreements with regard to specific questions. So, if we had a prism, we could actually take all the responses to those questions we were just looking at and divide them, separate them into unique and different audiences. And this is a really important thing to be able to do, because the basic communication equation, which has existed for tons of years, is who says what to whom. And if we can define the to whom, in other words, if we can define the audience we're speaking to, we can direct our messages more precisely, we can reinforce better, we can educate better, and we can even convert better if we know exactly who we're talking to. That's the task that can be accomplished by applying something called segmentation, which actually divides public opinion into unique audiences which are highly similar among themselves and very different from each other. The prism of segmentation research actually creates these 5 audiences. From top to bottom, those who are pro-renewable but strongly against fossil fuels, 15% of the population. Pro-renewable, still anti-fossil fuels, but less so than this audience. The third audience, also pro-renewable, but very pro-fossil fuels. The fourth audience, fence sitters, and the last audience, those who are anti-renewable. Well, first of all, looking across this audience, I'm going to dismiss this last audience as being non-existent, because you ain't here. Or because you are here, you ain't there. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. I don't think we have many of these folks either, fence sitters. I think most of the people in this audience, by definition of your interest, are either in group number 1, which is pro-renewables but anti-fossil fuels, or 2, pro-renewables but have some questions on fossil fuels, or group number 3, pro-renewables and pro-fossil fuels. As I go into the next slide, your task, your little homework, if you will, is put yourself in one of these 3 audiences. And I'm going to help you do it by showing how the actual data from 1,200 registered voters that came out of the field about 2 weeks ago break themselves into these audiences. First of all, on the question of moral obligation, the 3 audiences, which quite frankly constitute, the 3 audiences which actually constitute the basis for this movement in favor of clean and renewable energy sources comes from these. This moves much too fast. One more. That audience comes from the combination of these three groups, all of them strongly pro-renewable, but different in some aspect with regard to fossil fuels. So let's look at the difference. First of all, where are they aligned? Where are the things you can talk to them about that you simply need to reinforce their point of view? A moral obligation to protect the planet and clean up pollution. In the 90s, across the board, those three audiences. Clean air and clean water is good for everybody. In the 90s, for those audiences as well. Creating jobs, again, well into the 90s. These people believe those things. Look at the intensity. If I put the slide right, you could do that. The intensity over here. 69% in audience one strongly agree that we have a moral obligation. 42%, 45% in the other two audiences also strongly agree. 61% cleaner air and water is a benefit for everyone. 39 and 40%. Again, extraordinarily high strength of intensity as well as incredible direction. Creating jobs, 42, 31, 38%. Strong intensity, strong direction. The foundation, if you will, for a movement which simply needs the easiest of all persuasive techniques, namely reinforcement, to keep them on side. If these other kinds of issues do not muddy the water. For example, on the issue of freeing ourselves from imports from unfriendly countries by continuing the use and development of our own fossil fuel resources. Each of those three audiences have a margin of agreement. The least agreement comes with audience number one, pro-renewable and anti-fossil. Pro-renewable but anti-fossil. But even 43% of that audience does express some agreement. The intensity, though, is fairly weak. But look at the other two audiences, strongly pro-renewable, but my golly, those numbers are not bad at all in terms of their concern over imports coming from overseas and what that means in terms of the development of our own fossil fuel resources. The same thing is true and repeated in terms of making our products more expensive and less competitive in the world market, which also, it doesn't impact audience number one, but it certainly impacts audiences 2 and 3. And lastly, and this is the area where I think you're going to maybe we'll want to talk a little bit more about, neither audience 1 or 2 are impacted by fossil fuels remaining the cornerstone. But audience 3, strongly pro-renewable, really is. I'm going to tell you that this audience becomes probably the one that is most challenging for us. And the reason for that is that it's not so much that this group is wedded to fossil fuels. It's more what Celinda has said about the reluctance to give away something, to get rid of something which is an essential part of the life which is being led, and doing it in a way where there is no complete dependence on other sources of energy. So it's the giving up, it's the risk that's taken if you give up too quickly. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to shut up, but I'm going to show you one more slide, 2 more slides, and then I'll be done. First of all, where are women on these audiences, this core, if you will, of support for the growing groundswell of clean energy? Well, they're in a very solid position across the board. But please note where they are concentrated. They are concentrated in audience number 3. Audience number 3 being the audience which is most sensitive to giving up fossil fuels. Again, it becomes an issue of timing. How fast are you expecting us to do that? If you do it too fast, I could be at risk. My husband could be at risk. The job that I depend on could be at risk. And that recreates a sense of doubt. And it's something that we have to deal with in terms of how we're going to address it. I'm going to skip to this next chart because the second leg of the stool on which we hope to be able to build a solid movement in favor of clean and sustainable energy has to do with consumption. And Celinda has introduced it. It is the basis upon which this country functions, and we will increase, if you will, the rapidity with which we're able to adopt sustainable energy sources to the degree which people make an investment in clean and efficient energy. What I can report, and one of the major differences, is from the difference between what the data Celinda was working with and what this new data shows, is that in every area, Celinda, the number of people who are participating, buying, consuming, using surveys to study the energy efficiency in their homes has increased significantly in 12 months. And that's an important finding. We still have very relatively low levels of information, although significantly higher than just a year ago. So the knowledge about this blue bar in every case reflects the amount of knowledge people claim to have with regard to renewable energies. It has gone up significantly over the last year in each of these audiences. Up to the mid, 2 out of 3 on average now think they have at least some knowledge. Depth of knowledge has remained relatively constant. It's gone up some, but still people don't claim to have a whole depth of knowledge about renewables. It's a complex field, and there's lots of conflicting information out there. It's difficult to become an expert in it, or at least feel very comfortable with the amount of knowledge you have. The green bar right here is how many products or services you have purchased in the last year that reflect a commitment to renewable energy. Well, look at our 3 audiences over here. Everybody has done something, virtually, in our 3 audiences to kind of walk the talk. They have done something. They've purchased something. At the bottom of this bar is the percent who have made 5 or more purchases of a renewable device, an Energy Star appliance, a solar system, something that has reflected their commitment to renewable and sustainable energy. This has grown significantly over a year ago. More people are making an in-depth commitment, and it's just an arbitrary figure. Is 5 devices in a year a significant moral commitment? I don't know. You might want to do 6 or 10, but we did 5. And what I can tell you is that 5 is growing. And that's important because it represents a deeper penetration of a financial consumer commitment to the renewable energy sources. The question that should occur to you is, what are they buying? Well, here's the list of products and services they could choose from. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to be able to go in any great depth, but you can see the top 6, starting with LED light bulbs and ending with smart thermostat. Nearly 3 out of 10 people have made that purchase of one or more of those items in the last year's period. So that's a growing commitment. Another question, I guess, is that the end? That's the end. Let me just tell you, for women, when they make purchases, it did, that's interesting. Well, now I'll tell you what the slide says. When you break this down in terms of the top 6 choices between men and women, you don't see a great deal of difference. You do see a difference in terms of light bulbs, where women are more likely to purchase light bulbs. Light bulbs are a market purchase. And you go to the market, you're buying something, and there's a stack of light bulbs on a thing, and you pick a couple up. That's the decision which women make much more frequently than men. Most of the other decisions with regarding investment in renewable energy seem to be made jointly. There's just no difference between the number of men and the number of women who are buying these objects. And these, remember, are every time you buy a washing machine, you're making a pretty significant financial investment. And the data strongly suggests that that investment is most likely to be made jointly. Now, it may be driven by the woman in the home, but the man takes credit for it, which we do a lot. But at least when men talk about it, they see it as an equal investment. They've made the choice to buy an Energy Star washing machine. So it may be the women that are driving it in the home to get the purchase made, but men take claim for it just as frequently as women do, and that enhances the male commitment to clean and sustainable energy. I know I've gone over my time. I apologize. There's lots here, folks, and there's lots more coming.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Let me begin by thanking Celinda and Vince for, I'm going to say, extraordinary information, transformational information. And I'm going to say for a layperson like myself, an ability to understand the relevance of numbers and audiences, and in a way that I actually can use them. So I really want to thank you for that. Thank you all for being here. We are very pleased to be able to activate this conversation in New York and beyond. And we are going to turn right away to our panelists and to you. And then we will spend time really actually discussing. Because if I have a sense of the power of what we heard, you probably have questions, comments that we want to be able to explore. So I'm going to begin by introducing our panelists, and then I see that Suki has a question. If it is a substantive question, we'll put it on our parking lot, but it might be that it's a logistic question. It is? Yes, I thought so. So Suki, please, what's the question? Thank you. And I want to, yes.
May I just add a thought to that?
Yes.
Because I don't think Vince or I could agree more with your point. So please take this in that answer. And our firm does an enormous amount of work on Native Americans and on Asian American Pacific Islanders. So I completely agree with you. I want to say 2 clarifications. One is Asian Americans and Native Americans were in both of our data sets. They were not big enough to break out separately, and that is a problem. Don't misunderstand me. And we would love to have had the resources to sample them. And frankly, it's not hard to get them. It's just expensive. And hopefully working in partnership with you, we can do that. And I think both communities would be very, very committed on this issue and are very important voices. But I do want to clarify that while not big enough to break out, and that is a problem, there is no question that is a problem, those audiences were in the data sets, just not big enough to break out separately to look at.
And believe me, we would certainly appreciate that strong voice going to some of our clients to make that
Yes,
point.
yes.
Because it is a matter of resources, and the truth of the matter is most clients will not pay the added expense in order to get sufficient sample size to be able to break out those populations separately.
And Suki, I want to say we hear you, and we will carry that forth. We hear your advice. We will work with Celinda and Vince and others to push for the appropriate resourcefulness, the appropriate visibility, the appropriate voice, and we're there with you. So I want to thank you for that and say that we at the foundation, as of this minute, will be making that an integral part of our own investment in research and others, and also work with others so they can support the integrity of the work and inclusiveness of all of our communities, particularly communities from the Asian diasporas, the Native American diasporas, in addition to the other diasporas that we are attending to. So, absolutely, and thank you for saying that. I just wanted to say that was not a logistic comment, and I appreciate that. I don't want anybody to misunderstand that this was a logistic comment. This is a major structural comment. So let's take it in the power that it needs to be taken. Oh, yes. Yes. We are good there, but I wanted to give the proper weight to what you put there. That it deserves. So listen, things that the New York Women's Foundation, things that we do are not mild things, okay? So we're starting the discussion exactly as we need to start. And Suki is setting a tone that I hope communicates to all of us the kind of voice, courage, and determination that we expect of our work together. So it's in that spirit that I am very pleased to introduce our panelists that you haven't met yet. Of course, you heard Celinda, you heard Vince, but I'm going to introduce to you very briefly, and you have their incredible bios available to you. So Marcia Bistrin is the president of the New York League of Conservation Voters. Yeah, but you know, I just wanted to say, and maybe you join me on that. No, I know, but I want to say something. I want to say something. I actually think that there is the political interpretation of a conservative, but there is the action of being not only a conservation, but somebody that conserves. And I wanted to say that we should reclaim some more territory and not cede that territory, even in the vocabulary. It's not what you do, but I'm just saying it's important for us. Next to Marcia is Angela Tovar, the Director of Community Development at The Point, Community Development Corporation. The Point has been a grantee partner of the foundation, in particular work with young women, and we are very, very pleased that you're here. Ana Orozco is the Climate Justice Policy and Programs Coordinator at UPROSE. And has also a very trailblazing history of victories in actually changing systems and laws in the area of environmental justice. And of course, Vince and Celinda. So I'm going to kick this off by asking one or two questions to our panelists and give you just time to think about what you're going to be wanting to ask. We have two mics, as you can see, standing here, and we want to hear your thoughts and your questions in a couple of minutes. So when you heard the presentations, when you hear the information, what are your reactions, what are your thoughts, what are your reflections, and how does that relate and resonate to your own experience and work and your own leadership. So, Marcia.
Well, I'd like to thank both Vince and Celinda for really spectacular presentations. You know, I think, let me just take a step back. What I found most interesting, and it made me think, renewables. We care about renewables. But why? Do we care about renewables intrinsically because we feel they're less polluting? Or do we see them primarily as a means of combating climate change? And those are two different things. And in fact, there's some fundamental tensions there. And let me just throw out one example. Governor Cuomo has his PSC, Public Service Commission, has put out their clean renewable standard. And basically, this is going to require 50% renewables in New York State by 2030. But the reason that renewables are being pushed is because if we're to get to our CO2 targets, 80 by 50, we need a renewable plan. And as part of that renewable plan is nuclear, because nuclear, if your goal is to get to your CO2 emission, the assessment was you were going to need substantial nuclear. And in fact, there were going to be benefits to some of the existing nuclear facilities here. So I'm just throwing out a set of contradictions that I hadn't thought about before.
Excellent. Angela.
Great. I want to comment on a couple of things. One, Ms. Soki, thank you very much for your comments. I think that is exactly the type of voice that women, particularly women of color, need to have in this space. I think that we are at a time, Marcia mentioned the REV process, and we're at a time where our state and local, even our federal officials are asking us for feedback on what we would like to see in a clean energy future. And I think equity has to be front and center in that conversation. So I thank you for that. I think that that's just one example. Renewable energy and even the green collar workforces, these are male-dominated fields. And I think it's time that we as women not only show interest in renewable energy, but that we engage women in conversations and mobilize women to be a part of these solutions as these processes are playing out on the federal, state, and local level. I want to comment on two things. Thank you very much for the data that you presented. There's two things that resonated with me. It's great to see that women are in favor of renewable energy. But I think that as a community organizer and someone that works on the ground, I think I'm pleased to see that so many women are tying it back to the social implications of renewable energy. For us, it's very easy to get women into the door when we're talking about community organizing efforts. I work in Hunts Point, which is an environmental justice community. A lot of our children are suffering from asthma locally. We have had a heavy environmental burden that we've carried on behalf of the city for a very long time because we're in an industrial area. So it's very easy to get people into the door, especially women. They can talk about how their children are suffering for asthma. They talk about the issues with transportation locally. They talk about the pollution. But for me, as an organizer, I really need to make the connection, especially as we're thinking about renewable energy in our community, of how I can tie this and make this connection together. I think that renewable, some of the things that women bring to the table, especially some of these issues around health, are the problems, but renewable energy could potentially be the solution, and I need to consider that as an advocate and an organizer. The other point that I want to make, it was interesting to hear that women of color felt that renewable energy is too costly. I think that in my other hat, prior to being at the point, I ran an energy efficiency program for Sustainable South Bronx, and I feel that response may be because there are barriers to participation for women in the programs that exist through NYSERDA, New York State. There's a lot of challenges that the programs have just in terms of how they're engaging low-income customers and how they're engaging women of color. And I think that may be why you see such a poor response from women in terms of affordability. So I think as we move forward with REV and with the city's goal of 80 by 50, we have to start thinking of how our programs are reaching these communities.
Thank you. Okay, Anna.
Sure, thank you. A few things jumped out at me from both presentations, and thank you for sharing the extensive data that you both collected. One of the things that jumped out at me that I'd like to talk a little bit about is this idea or stereotype that women of color don't have an understanding about renewable energy or sustainable living. When we think about sustainable living, women of color come from communities that have been living sustainably since the beginning of time. So those of us who grew up in households led by women of color have an understanding of reusing things, of shame around waste. There is no waste. When you look at everything from the food we eat, we use all parts of the animals. And when you look at our lifestyle of reusing things, the idea of buying Tupperware is preposterous if you can buy food products that you need and use that come in plasticware, that you can reuse those sorts of things. So this idea of reusing and reducing our waste is nothing new to women of color. And I'd also like to thank the audience member for the comment about not including Asian and Native American women or highlighting the data that comes from the women, because also I really appreciate the comment that especially when we talk about Asian communities, a lot of countries in Asia are blamed for the climate crisis today, especially from the United States. We like to put blame elsewhere and not necessarily look within. But again, women from these very same countries are from communities that understand the importance of sustainability and sustainability for life. So it's important to acknowledge that. Another thing that sort of jumped out at me from the presentations was this talk about transitioning from the fossil fuel-based economy to a renewable energy economy, and some fears that some people have around that transition process, because bottom line is the fossil fuel-based economy does provide jobs, and oftentimes those jobs are for working class communities. So there is a fear around losing jobs. So at UPROSE, we're a member of the Climate Justice Alliance. It's a nationwide alliance of environmental justice organizations. We talk a lot about just transitions. So transitioning from the fossil fuel-based economy to a renewable economy in a just and fair way where nobody is left behind. And in this work, we have to talk with labor unions, with folks who rely on this industry for their jobs. And these folks are concerned about the fossil fuel economy and the fact that it's fueling climate change, and they're concerned for their future, for the future of their communities and for their children. So they'd like to participate in the transition, but in a way that would ensure that they're not losing their jobs, that offer generally pretty decent salaries, and if they're union jobs, then benefits as well. So we'd like to see the renewable energy economy focus on communities that are affected first and worst by climate change, communities that are overburdened with polluting facilities, and communities that rely on those same facilities for jobs. So if the movement to transition to renewable energy is led by those of us affected first and worst and those of us whose jobs rely on it, the movement towards renewable energy will be led in a fair and just way.
Excellent. Thank you. So one more question, and then we're going to open up to all of you. So when I hear about your vision and your thoughts about the presentation, and I heard Celinda and Vince say that there is a critical moment, a readiness, and I think Celinda said the revolution is here. We need to move it. We have the opportunity to move it quicker and faster ahead, if I got the gist of your message. So I hear the power of your leadership, Marcia, Angela, Anna. What is it that you think is the unique added value that you bring to this space, and how do you want to leverage that value more in your leadership to accelerate that revolution that we're talking about and you're talking about?
Let me just say a brief word about who we are. We're really two organizations. The League of Conservation Voters is a political statewide organization that works to elect people we believe are good on environment. And we are nonpartisan, so we work with both Republicans and Democrats. And in that capacity, we do a lot of advocacy work on legislation, both in Albany and New York City and in our various chapters. It's in our educational work that I think we have the greatest opportunity, though, to move the ball forward. In the following sense, though, these issues are not simple. They are complicated. You can believe passionately in renewables, and yet, as we move this out on Long Island, for example, we work with people who morally care a great deal about the environment, but you know what they also care about? They care about open space preservation. So you have limited open space on Long Island. Do you use it for large array solar? A lot of that community says no. So you have people who theoretically want to promote renewables, would certainly put renewables on their rooftop, but are they going to advocate for large-scale solar when they feel they have limited open space? No. Similarly, we're working in Westchester with a group of both political people, business people, community groups to address how you actually have adequate fueling, charging stations for electric vehicles. You're promoting electric vehicles. There's money from Albany for this. But you know, it's not that easy, in fact, to charge it. And if you can't charge it, you're not going to buy it. You can't believe the array of practical building codes, zoning issues that are involved, but I think that that's really where you move the ball forward, when you get people together to solve practical problems. And the last issue I'd like to throw out is what we're doing up in the Capital Region. It's around solar, going back, forget large-scale solar, but let's solar panels on the roofs. Again, one of the impediments is building and zoning codes, because there are communities that feel putting solar on roofs does not fit with the character of the community. So how do you work locally, practically, to change those codes? So it's at that practical level, problem-solving level, that I think we can be most effective.
Angela.
So I'm going to speak from my very hyper-local experience in Hunts Point in the Bronx. Right now, we have $45 million that has been allocated from HUD and from the City of New York through the Rebuild by Design process. Hunts Point was a Sandy-impacted community, and we received this capital money to invest in a resiliency project. The project, because of the work of a number of people, has been determined that we are going to invest that capital investment into an energy-related project. And so as a community group, we are now thinking about how we can engage people on the ground in this process. What we found is that 38% of the households in Hunts Point are female-led households. These are women of color. This doesn't consider women that are married and make decisions dually. This is just speaking to women that are running single households. And so for us, we feel like this is a great opportunity to empower women not only to be present in this space, but also to be decision makers in this process. And so we want to make sure that women are at the table, that they're front and center in this conversation, and that their priorities are reflected as we determine what should be done with this capital funding. In addition to that, we have to just stop thinking about bringing women to the table and hearing their opinions. For us, we have to think larger than that. And right now, what we're trying to think is, how can we also build assets within, as we're making these investments into the community, how can we also make assets that benefit people who are traditionally left out of this space, right? So as we're thinking about community solar, or as we're thinking about a microgrid system or something like that for our community, how can we make sure that women are owners, that women are operators, and that we're leveraging job opportunities as well?
Anna.
I'll talk a little bit about the Sunset Park perspective. UPROSE is an environmental justice organization based in Sunset Park, so all of our organizing is done within Sunset Park. We are, as a community, we're predominantly Latino and Asian, mostly an immigrant population, and we're also the largest walk-to-work community in New York City. And we're home to one of the last remaining industrial waterfronts in New York City. We're home to a significant maritime industrial area, and we're seeing a lot of our industrial waterfronts rezoned, and we're seeing a lot of luxury hotels and condos built in those areas. And so, as an environmental justice organizations, we've had to take on new campaigns that haven't traditionally been involved in because of the intersectionality of our work. And I think that this goes back to my earlier comment about this idea that women of color might not have environment or climate change at the top of their list of concerns, but it's because of concerns around healthcare for our families, education for our families, and it's not that environment is not involved in that, it's that there's an intersectionality of all of these issues. So back to the industrial waterfront in Sunset Park, it is a place that has traditionally provided jobs that are local. It's a place that the community has really grown to rely on, and it's vulnerable right now to the very same developers who have been changing New York City for a few decades now. So we're really trying to connect our anti-displacement campaign to the idea of just transitions. We're talking about the preservation of the industrial waterfront from the perspective of preserving jobs, and also talking about it as a potential for a hub for regenerative, renewable energy. And those could be jobs that are also local, and we can provide green jobs training programs in the community for current workers who work along the waterfront, and also start incorporating this sort of education in schools at a very early age so that young people understand that this is a new field of economy that offers lots of jobs in lots of different sectors.
Thank you. So let me ask Celinda and Vince if you want to add anything or if you want to open to others.
I'm open to the questions. I think these were fabulous comments.
Okay.
Agreed, but I had one comment.
Please.
And the comment goes back to the, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. I apologize.
Marcia.
Marge, regarding the conflict that you often encounter when you're dealing with issues where you actually want to do something. Remember the three audiences I put up there that are the core for sustainable energy? Audience number one sees renewable, sustainable energy as a byproduct of dealing with the issue of environmental change. And they are very intense about it. Audience number two sees the issue. In other words, they agree that climate change is going on, it's a bad problem, but there is much significantly less intensity that underpins that point of view. Audience number three doesn't see the environmental argument as part of the rationale for renewable energy much at all. So it varies across those audiences in a very systematic way, and you will encounter those differences every time you cross audiences, which means that those 3 points, and those points can be expanded upon in terms of where everybody agrees. Those 3 points work very well if you stick to them. If you decide to change the basis of the argument and go to climate change as a rationale for renewable energy and sustainable development, you're going to start losing some in group 2, and when you get to audience number 3, they're going to say, what? And I think you have to recognize that.
Thank you. Okay, let us hear from you. Your thoughts, questions, comments. I do not believe you don't have them. Yes, please.
Please speak to the mic, the live.
Yes. Do you mind just so we can all hear you? Yes, go ahead. And you, if you can come to this one.
So my question is about the practicality of technology. So the data that you've shown is so interesting, and the work that all of you are doing is so important. Where do you intersect with technology? So you gave the example of policy, regulation, zoning, the ability for storage for renewables. There's some real impediments still. So can you just address that and how you formulate that into the bigger picture?
Who would like to take that?
I can start with a kind of framing point while people are collecting their thoughts, because I too I think it's a fascinating question, and I'm very interested in the local solution. So in terms of technology and policy, there's kind of an interesting divide in the data. Men are more technologically oriented. They're the ones that believe, well, we can just redesign this, we can do the technological solution. Women are the more policy-oriented ones. They are the ones that are more for changing the rules. And they really respond to language like pragmatic, common sense, proper, whatever that means. They also believe in tough enforcement, and women are really the backbone of tough enforcement. So women have this this triangle of believing we can rewrite the rules and create incentives, to wanting to reinforce that. If we collectively decide to do this, then women perceive themselves to be the enforcer of the rules. And thirdly, thinking a lot of this stuff, why can't we get it goes back to why can't we get 2 for 1? This is just a regulation that doesn't make any sense. Any 3 of us around coffee could agree on changing this. Let's just get it done. So the technological stuff is more male-oriented. Now, it would be interesting to look at the overlap, and maybe Vince can comment on this, there is a whole separate classification we could do on technological innovators. And they are dominated by men, but not exclusively men. They're also more likely to be millennials and more likely to be college-educated people. And so it would be interesting to do that overlay on this data and see that match. But in general, women are the ones that say, this makes no sense, why can't we change it?
Let me just respond in 2 ways. One on technology in general, and this gets back to renewables. We as an organization feel very strongly that technology evolves, and as one looks at renewables, one isn't necessary. One is interested in what they achieve, not in them intrinsically, so that you should create as many incentives as possible for competing new technologies. So on that end, that's very much where we are. Don't favor wind or solar or whatever, but favor the broader issue of CO2 emissions. And I think when you're talking about technology here, I mean, we're a very pragmatic organization, and our view is if you're going to get something done, and much of it has to do with regulation as opposed to technology, you have to understand it. And in fact, if you're really going to affect change, you have to know what the rules are and how you either change them or revise them or whatever if you're really going to get where you want to go.
So, thank you. Maybe can I be a little more specific on the point to clarify? So
Briefly, because I want to take a question
yeah,
as well.
of course. So what I'm referring to is storage of energy. So I know that you brought up about jobs being a big issue, and of course that is, and the unions are in on that to make that transition just. A big issue still relies on, we want to have our light bulbs turned on, we want to have our energy sources be reliable. And industry would say, for example, that they still have to keep the same cost for running backup fossil fuel because the storage capabilities, technologies aren't there yet. So I'm just wondering, from a practical perspective, about that in a complicated way and how you educate women in an industry that is male-dominated. So, thank you.
So,
Yes.
Give a shot at that? I'm sorry.
the mic.
I'd love to sort of take a shot, and I apologize. My name is Ann Davlin. I'm actually on Marcia's education board, and I actually work in EV and storage. And the question that you're asking, and I don't want to spend, and I'm happy to visit with you on this after, what you're really asking is, are existing technologies out there? And can we use them? And can we, women are incredibly practical. We want to look at existing proven technologies and how we can scale and how we can work together, and if they can move forward. And I mean, men feel that way as well, but obviously I'm referring back to Celinda's comments. What I will say is, you're talking about large-scale storage is still in play. There are things that you can do that are smaller. One thing New York State has is we're looking at microgrids, and so storage can get to that point. So I'm saying that we're not quite there yet, but there are some technologies that can be used in small scale. One thing is there are about 5 companies in the U.S. led by Tesla, actually, that with their EV chargers, they actually have storage, and the storage can run the chargers.
Thank you. Thank you. You have a question.
Thank you for the presentations, and thank you for the great work that you're doing at the community level as well. Since elections are kind of in the air, I just wanted to talk about maybe in a strive to move away from bipartisan politics within the near future, maybe in my lifetime. I was wondering what the impact some of this data and women in general and maybe renewable technologies can have on improving the Green Party. Yeah. Anybody has any comment?
Okay.
I wouldn't mind.
Go,
answering
Anna, please.
first. I think that we have yet to really address openly or calling it by name what's fueling climate change. So it's fossil fuel-based economy. What does that mean? It's capitalism, consumerism. So talking about addressing the issue by using our consumer power is interesting because it falls back into consumerism, and that's what's fueling climate change. So I'd like to talk about consumerism from using our consumer power not to buy into the fossil fuel-based economy anymore. Instead of talking about new gadgets that can help us. And it's unfortunate that we are stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to choosing our elected officials. The two-party system is come to a place where sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the two parties. And a lot of that is because of capitalism. Again, who is funding their campaigns and who are they beholden to? Democracy was set up so that candidates and politicians hear from their constituents. Constituents put them in power. We are the ones who are their bosses, essentially. But the way it's turned out now, they're more concerned about who's financing their campaigns than who's actually voting for them and putting them in office. And that's the sort of system that we have to take on, head on right now, if we want to talk about stopping climate change. And so we have to remember that we have a lot of power. We have a lot of influence. All of us. Women especially have been leading the movement to curb climate change. We have this essential understanding about the importance of the futures of our family. It's been said a few times today that women think down the line, they think about consequences. We think ahead of time versus, well, let's just try it and see where the pieces fall. If it doesn't work, let's just pick up and start over again. We understand that that can be catastrophic. So I just want to leave with saying that we do have a lot of power. We ought to think outside of the box and remind ourselves that we have the power. And when we want to talk about stopping climate change, we really have to think about deconstructing the systems that we're living in and think about small-scale sort of community living and how we can together understand our particular community and what we need, and we are able to accomplish creating communities that we want to live in and having communities where we're not fueling climate change anymore. We're actually living in a way that conserves what we have.
That is really a perfect place for us, unfortunately also because of time, to leave with the message that Anna is giving her. And I want to just do two things. I want to thank some people who have made this happen, who have been seeing opportunities for us to accelerate that kind of partnership and support so that what Anna is talking about can actually be, happening with more urgency. So I want to begin with our colleagues at the Civil Society Institute, with Pam Solo, who couldn't be here with us today, Andrew Camp, Emily Tynes, Kathleen Bonk, and thank you so much for reaching out to the foundation and opening up the opportunity and your vision and understanding that we follow communities we work with, but we follow communities, we follow your leadership. And I want to thank the New York Law School, of course, Dean Anthony Crowell and his special events team, who've been a pleasure for the New York Women's Foundation to work with and very generous to hold us here today. And I want to thank the fabulous team at the New York Women's Foundation who makes these things happen and without whom the foundation wouldn't be able to create this kind of community and building relationship. And in this particular event, I want to thank Gail Black, Vivian Pang, Nancy Guida, Kate Landon, Grace Asenjo, and Stephanie Oster. So without your, really smart coming together, we wouldn't be having today. And I want to thank you because I do want to add one thing to what Anna just said, is that democracy takes work. Ensuring democracy takes work. And so you're here working on this today. We thank you for that, and we hope that you and all the people in our lives will be accelerating our work towards that preservation and advancement of true democratic principles and processes as we are in such critical times in our own history. So thank you so much. I wanted to thank Suki in particular as well, and wish everyone a great day.